This is December 8th,
Right.
1988. My name is Joe Todd, and this is an interview with Mr. George Murphy, Jr. And we're in Oklahoma City, but where do you live, sir?
I live in McCullummy Hill. Mokelumne, Hill, California. It's part of the old gold rush, Mother Lode area. It's an old gold mining town. Northern California.
Sir, when were you born? When's your birthday?
August 22nd, 1921.
And where were you born?
Stockton, California.
Stockton, California. And who were your parents?
Well, Mr. and Mrs. George Murphy Sr.
And what was your mother's maiden name?
Her maiden name was Pierce.
Pierce. P-I-E-R-C-E?
P-I-E-R-C-E.
And her given name was?
Effie S. Pierce.
F-E-E-F-F?
E-F-F-I-E-S. Pierce.
Why did you join the Navy?
Well, I've been at the University of California for a year and a half, at 38 and 39. I'd decided what I wanted to major in and was drifting around, so you could see the war clouds coming. This is 1940. So I joined the Navy in May.
May of 19?
May 23rd, 1940.
Why the Navy over the Marines or the Army?
Well, I don't know. I just had a kind of sort of a fascination with the sea, no particular reason. It struck me as it'd probably be a cleaner life. They were talking about the draft at that time.
And you enlisted where?
In San Francisco. Well, Stockton, but I was sworn in at San Francisco.
San Francisco. And where'd you go for boot camp?
San Diego.
San Diego. Could you give me a good description of boot camp? What'd you do there?
Well, they were trying to whip you into shape. One of my favorite stories is that when they give you your sea bag and hammock and all your clothes, you can't pick it up, and you can sling it with one hand over your shoulder when you walk out. They just get you in shape. Get you out at crack of dawn or earlier and march on the grinder pretty much all day.
What's a grinder?
Well, it was the black asphalt, huge courtyard where you drilled. They called that the grinder. And you drilled, and you ran wherever you went from place to place, on the double. You stood watches, learned seamanship, did a little small boat work, the knots, and, Blue Jackets manual, and the Navy lore. You didn't get anything in detail because they waited until you went on to another school if you were going to.
What were your meals like in boot camp?
Well, I can't remember exactly. I presume it was somewhere aboard ship. I don't really remember. Lots of it, but it wasn't gourmet food, of course.
And how long will boot camp last?
Well, just about 8 weeks, 2 months. And then you get a 2-week leave. You don't go ashore the first 2 months. You can't go into town. And after you finish your 2 months, then you get 2 weeks leave, come back, and then you wait around. I can't think of the name of the holding thing they put you in until you get assigned. Whether you go to school or a ship. You can request ships. I requested the California just by name. Well, they gave me a Battleship. They gave me the Oklahoma, which was at Bremerton at that time, Washington, dry dock, being overhauled. So I joined the Oklahoma in August. I don't know the exact date. Went by train from San Diego to Bremerton. Went aboard a ship there.
When you first saw the Oklahoma, what did you think?
That was a mess. It stunk of welding and it was all torn apart, and there were cables all over the ship. One of my first duties, they grabbed the newest recruits to do the dirtiest job, was to go down under the bottom and scrape the bottom.
So it was in dry dock at that time?
It was in dry dock, yeah.
How do you scrape the bottom of a battleship?
Well, it's pretty tough. It's about, I don't know how many acres it is, but it's awful big under there, and you can either stand up or you can't stay on your knees, and you just kind of duck waddle under there and get a paint scraper and scrape, and then they've got a mechanical thing, the electric brush. You have to get all the acid out. There's a lot of acid ate all through my blues, just ate the clothes off.
Acid what's?
Well, it's just a reaction, I guess, between the seawater and the metal.
I don't have a Navy background, so.
They put anti-fouling paint on those things, but the barnacles get on there, and I think they figured an overhaul at that time, peacetime, was about every year and a half or 2 years you go into dry dock.
Now, how does dry dock work? How do you get under a battleship?
Well, they go in there and they position where you use wooden blocks. They know that the ship precisely its dimensions.
So the ship
Of course, the dry dock is filled with water. You sail in, and they lower this. They pump the water out. And the ship settles in these cradles. And then when you're ready to go out, they just flood the dry dock again, and you back out.
Were you on board when they hit the freight train?
Yes. I wish I'd kept that newspaper. The Bremerton Sun had a headline, "Battleship Sinks Freight Train." And I mailed that home to my folks, and they kept it. I've lost it along the line somewhere after the war.
What happened?
Well, we were coming out of the dry dock. I don't know whether... I always thought we'd back into it, and a fellow yesterday insisted we were back and then went ahead. But there was a tug going across Puget Sound, towing a barge with freight train engine and a bunch of freight cars on it. And we hit that tow line, which swung the barge around into the side of the ship, and I saw it just tip over and everything just slide into the drink off the freight car. So we had to go back into dry dock. That was the first time out after the war. Initial, as I recall, it was initial flooding, getting out. But we had little plate damage where the barge hit us.
Any injuries or anything?
No, it didn't hit very hard. It just swung that tow line. Didn't part it. It swung the barge around and hit the side of the ship. It just went up on edge and everything fell into the bay there.
And it was a freight train then?
It was a full, yeah, it was freight.
Was there any crew member, engineer, or anything on
I've
it?
never heard it. Just, but I certainly would like to have the Bremerton Sun.
What time of day was that?
Well, I couldn't even tell you that. It was light, a little foggy, as I recall. And that may be why they hit it.
Now, where were you when you
I was topside. I was watching the whole thing. It's my first time at sea. So I was on deck, watching the show. I didn't have any duties involving getting underway. So I was free to stand around and golf.
What was your reaction when you saw that?
I wrote my folks and told them, I said, this Navy's got their hands on us. First time you go, you sink a freight train. And of course, it had other accidents later on. Ran into the Arizona, and
I've heard about
the
that.
Enterprise hit our jackstaff on a fantail, and if it had hit us, it would have been an awful mess.
How long were you in dry dock after you hit the freight train?
As I recall, not very long. We went out for sea trials and came back in the dry dock, or docked, but didn't get dry. Just needed to do some more work, clean up. Then we went down to Long Beach, as I recall, was our first stop.
Now, what happened when you hit the Arizona?
Well, it was a night battle practice, and I don't think they were even running truck lights. Later on, I think they did. We didn't do very well against the Japanese early in the war, night battle. And, one reason was we didn't practice enough, and we didn't do it realistically. It was just a collision. She was coming in on an angle, and we were. And had some front end damage, and so did she. And that was 41, but I don't recall just when that was.
Now, what happened with the Enterprise?
Well, it was another night operation. You couldn't see anything, and the Enterprise had to be on deck at that time. And she came right at us from the stern while she was crossing almost at right angles, I guess. And you could look up and see that flight deck seemed like 100 feet up there. And just knocked the flagstaff on the rear. I think they call it the jackstaff, is it, or what?
I've heard
The
of
jack?
flagstaff.
And when the ankle's out, and she hit that, and that's the only damage we had.
How close did the Enterprise come to the Oklahoma?
Well, just feet, because that flag doesn't stick out there very far, maybe 10 feet.
But the
Kinda
ships,
long angle.
yeah, the ships didn't actually collide though.
Didn't hit, no, didn't touch.
That was close.
That was close. Another time I remember we were having a night battle practice, and the Lurleen was leaving out earlier. We were out in a black knot formation, and the Lurleen came sailing wild, lit up like a Christmas tree, big luxury liner, just went right through the whole fleet into what, nothing was closed, I don't think, but I don't think she knew we were there. And, see, you didn't have this radar in those days, so you were pretty well operating blind.
And what was the name of that ship?
Lurleen.
What?
Matson liner.
Okay.
That was before air travel to Hawaii.
How do you spell that?
Lurline. That was their queen ship. They had the Matsonia and the Mariposa and some other cruise ships. But if you wanted to go to Hawaii in those days, you took a ship from San Francisco.
Where were your quarters in Oklahoma?
Well, mine were on the second deck just outside the print shop. We were part of C Division, which was a communications division, which included radiomen, signalmen, and those kind of people. But we were actually part of that. We were an offshoot. There was a printer at that time. And, so we had 4 bunks just outside the print shop door. So I never knew many of the C Division people.
And is that in midship? Is that fore, aft, or where is that on the battleship?
Well, it's close to a midships. Yeah, it'll be close to the midships on the second deck. They just put an entirely brand new print shop on it, new linotype, new presses, completely new setup. And because I'd had some college training and I had some pretty good at math, they first assigned me to the Fire Control Division, which runs the directors to fire the guns and all that sort of thing. But then when I happened to wander into the print shop and told him my background, I'd worked in my father's weekly shop as a printer. Ski, the head printer, being a first class, didn't want to work. He needed a printer badly because he didn't want to sit that linotype presses himself. So he knew his way around, and he got me out of F Division in no time, and I went down to the print shop.
Now, what did you print in the Oklahoma?
Well, we printed the ship's paper, we printed all the letterheads, and we were working on a big book of about 200 pages, I guess. We spent quite a few months on a table of the ship's organization. And the flimsies they used for the codes and so forth up on the bridge. Business, anything that the printed nature, they used. And a lot of paperwork in the Navy, and we just printed it all. You'd be surprised, it was a busy little shop.
What kind of presses did you have?
Well, we had a Craftsman automatic press, which is a platen press, but it was automatic, it fed itself. Then we had an open hand press where maybe you've seen them work or know how they work. And then we had a linotype and a lot of handset type, various sizes. And all the wooden furniture to make up the forms and so forth. We didn't have a cylinder press, unfortunately. We could have used it.
How much paper did you carry at one time?
Well, we had to draw the paper. We couldn't carry it. It was a very small shop. In fact, it was built around a stack. It had a curve in it. And we had to go to the supply room and draw the requisition paper. We always got a little more than we needed because the printer did a little printing on the side, which was accepted. When I first went in there, the Marine orderly, the Captain Foy, E.J. Foy, came down to the print shop and asked Ski, the head printer, how much is it for 500 business cards? Well, the captain doesn't have to pay for business cards. He can just sign a requisition and there they are. But Ski says, oh, $3 or whatever it was. I don't know the figure at that time. And the Marine orderly, when he came down to pick up the cards, gave him the $3. That's the old cum show, you do something for me and I'll do something for you. And Ski was a master at it. And Captain, being an old hand, knew how the Navy worked.
Did you know Captain Ford?
Yeah, I not well, but I met him at Key. He come to the shop.
What kind of man was he, Captain Ford?
Very kind old gentleman, a very nice guy, as opposed to his successor.
His successor was?
Well, King Bodie. He's only been on there a month or so. And he later went on to the U.S.S. Chicago, a heavy cruiser. And if you're familiar with the first Battle of Savo Island, when Quincy and the Astoria and Vincennes were sunk, well, he was captain of Chicago at that time. And they lost a bow. And he didn't perform very well. He came boiling out. Cease fire, those are our own ships. And of course, there were Jap ships, and we had a disaster. Lost 3 cruisers and an Australian cruiser. Just a matter of minutes. Then he later committed suicide. He shot himself in the head. Somewhat later, I don't know just when. He was a very autocratic, well, he was erratic. He had a bad reputation. But those peacetime Navy days, everybody went up by seniority. The war thinned them out, but it lost an awful lot of people with inadequate people. Until guys like Halsey came in to supersede Vice Admiral Gormley, who had the South Pacific first. Then you got some people who understood carrier power rather than battleships. We didn't have any battleships, and the battleship sailors were still running the Navy. That was one of the big problems before 1942.
What was your average day on the Oklahoma? Like what time did you get up? What would you
Well,
do?
we kind of ran our own store. We were not a fair test of. We'd get up and start the shop in the morning about 8 o'clock after breakfast, and worked a kind of a normal day, not off for lunch. And lots of times nothing to do. If we're at sea, we'd work nights even. If we were behind, or shut it down, as the case may be. We had a lot of fun on Saturdays because ski hated inspections. We wore dungarees as opposed to all this radiomen being in whites. We were more like the mechanical end of the business. And, so every Saturday morning, just before captain's inspection, we'd load the automatic press up with paper, get it going. We wouldn't ink it up or put a form in. We'd pick the blank paper was just running through it. And I'd sit the linotype and work and ski. The biz all looked busy. Captain would step to the door and ski would say, "Well, sir, we're working on Saturday because we're trying to get your ship's organization out. We're behind." The captain would say, "Well, good work, man," and out he'd go. He wouldn't even come in and inspect, and then we'd shut the press off. We wouldn't even have to wash it up because there was no ink in it. So we never really stood an inspection. So it was pretty good. Actually, it was a pretty good life. More normal than a seaman, say, who had a deck division and was out wholly storing decks, rigging the lifeboats, shore boats, motor launches, and so forth. We were very autonomous.
Where'd you take your meals on the ship?
Well, we meet up in what they call a casemates. Are you familiar with a battleship at all?
Basically, yes.
Well, you know what the broadside batteries are? You can't see it too well. It's above the main deck and below the turrets. Those 5-inch 51 guns were located in casemates. And that's where we had the mess tables were set up. We were a bunk ship, but in a hammock ship, that's where your hammocks would be slung, would be in the casemates. We ate family style, not canteen, not cafeteria style. So the mess cooks would have to come down below up these ladders, sometimes the ship pitching and rocking, with what they call these tureens. They had a thing about this high with a handle, and each one had a pot on it, a lid, stacked about maybe 5 of those, 4 or 5, and they would come up and unload those on a table, and of course the first class sat at the outside, then the second on down the line to the newest guy on the ship. By the time we got down to the end, sometimes there wasn't much food. So we got served. We sat at tables and were served out of those kettles. They call tureens. T-U-R-E-E-N-S. It was kind of a tough mess cook job because they had to haul those things up 2 or 3 decks to get them up to the casemates. Casemates are fairly high up, quite a ways from the galley. Most ships, I went on to San Francisco, the heavy cruiser afterwards, and that was a cafeteria style. Didn't get served, you had to go through a line.
Were you aware of the Japanese buildup?
Just vaguely. We didn't have much. They never told you anything. They didn't. They should have. We'd have been better informed and better prepared crew if more people had lived with us. We really didn't have much. There was no papers, newspapers aboard. If you went to Honolulu, you might buy one. So really, we were not. We had a ship's daily bulletins that came out. It was mostly what you do during the day. One time I didn't have quarters and meal times and working party details and so forth. So we really didn't. We're very fuzzy on it. I wasn't aware that the United States and Japan were that near a war at all.
December 6th. Oh, you did.
Well, I had a hang. I went ashore. Friday was payday. And another fellow and I went ashore, and we got back at 1 o'clock, a little under the weather. Back was a little after 1. We caught kind of a late motor launch back to the ship. You see, unless you were married and were second class or above, or an officer, and had your wife, you couldn't stay ashore after 1 o'clock in the morning. There were no accommodations at all. And before that, the guys just sleeping in streets and so forth. So they restricted the liberty to 1 a.m. And that's the time you caught the last boat back. And of course, we've been partying over in the bars and Hotel Street. And I woke up with a severe hangover the next morning, but first torpedo hit sobered me up.
Okay, starting with December 7th, what happened?
Well, I was in a print shop. I think I was the only one in there. The ski was ashore, and there were 2 other printer strikers in there, and they weren't in there. And I don't know where they were. Both died. Baum and Headington, both didn't make it. But I heard heard the bombs ringing, and it said, air attack, this is no shit. And you could tell by the tenor of the voice, there was panic in the voice, that this was no drill. I took about 1 step. I grabbed my shorts and my shoes and put them on, and just 1 step, and the first torpedo hit. That's just no notice at all.
What did it sound or feel like?
Well, it didn't make all that much noise. Of course, it hit in the water. It picked up the ship and shook it. Very insecure, like being an earthquake, I suppose. A very insecure feeling. And I just didn't know what was going on. Nobody said anything about the Japs. We didn't know what was going on. So I immediately went down a hatch right outside the print shop, down on the 3rd deck where my battle station was.
Where was your battle station?
Well, it was a damage control party. And it was down on the 3rd deck. And on the starboard side. Or on the port side, rather. And we just sort of mellowed. A lot of sailors down there, because when you get an air attack, I've heard them talk about general quarters. As far as I know, they didn't sound general quarters. All I heard was air attack. And the power and the lights went out almost immediately. And the emergency lights came on, you could see. But there was you didn't hear anything over the speaker anymore. So just a lot of people just went below that. That's the armor deck, the 3rd deck. You get below that, and there's about 3 or 4 inches of armor plate over you. And if you're unengaged, you're not part of an anti-aircraft battery or otherwise engaged. In an air attack, you go below. Everybody goes below deck, in addition to the damage control. So there were quite a few people down there, and it was quite crowded. And as of course, we kept feeling these. Fortunately, none hit right there. We kept feeling these big whumps and the ship shaking. And we saw a flash of fire one time come down the hall. I guess the torpedo hit a little farther away, and began to get develop a list. And they had big shoring timbers that damage control parties used up there, big 6x6s. They were used you put mattresses against shell holes and so forth to keep the water out. Well, they started falling down, and we had to get those out down, and of course everybody got brained. And then the water started coming in on the port side, and we developed quite a list, and I told another fellow, we better get the hell out of here. It was a vertical ladder. It was in the way up from where we were. We went to one of these armored hatches, which are quite heavy, because it's armored. This is the armored deck. And ordinarily it takes help from the top side to the other deck to pull them up. And it wasn't dogged down. If it were dogged down, we never would have gotten out. It should have been dogged down. If somebody had followed damage control procedures, that hatch would have been dogged. And I couldn't get it up, so finally we both stood up with this top of this vertical ladder, and just iron steps, steel rods. got our shoulders on it and got it up. And that put us up into the second deck. And I went down the second deck and went toward the fantail, thinking I could get up on the main deck and get out. And I got to the ladder that, well, the staircase, or the ladder, it was a regular, wider ladder. And a massive men on it, jammed on it. They surged up a ways and then surged back down, and I got up by the foot of the ladder, and then a voice from above said, "Don't worry, just stay down, it's on the bottom now." Well, it wasn't on the bottom, it hadn't rolled over yet. It was about, I'd say, maybe a 40 degree angle. And what I've always assumed is that all of a sudden all the 10-inch manila hawsers are tighter to the Maryland must have. I saw somewhere that they chopped those, and they may have anyway. That released the tension and was holding the battleship upright, and she just was very. I've heard people say they watched her very slowly and stately. Well, to me, it was. That may not be. Maybe I got it wrong, but it seemed to me I was standing there with one foot on the bulkhead and one on the deck, and on this angle, and all of a sudden the water was just over my head. I didn't feel the slow roll. So I didn't, I was totally underwater, and so I just gave a kick up, thinking I might be able to somehow get out that ladder and up to the S division, which would have led me out to the fantail in the open. Actually, it was a hopeless shot. It would have been 100 feet, I guess, or more. But just by chance, I popped up, sailed right through the operating room door, which is not a very big door. Just went through another compartment full of water and popped up in a little air pocket. And there were several guys in there. And that's where we ended up. And we didn't do anything for a long time in there because we didn't know where we were in the first place. We knew we had a tile ceiling. We had this little octagon. You see this little fine tile. Chief Warrant Officer by the name of Austin, Warrant Carpenter, who also died, had a flashlight. It's kind of oil smeared, you can see a little while. You can see this tile, and we couldn't think of any place in the ship that had tile, and we never did figure out it was the operating room. In fact, it was quite a while after Pearl Harbor that I finally concluded where I'd been. And we knew where we were. We thought, well, maybe somebody will get us out. So there was no particular panic. Everybody was calm. Well, then the air gradually started getting worse, and of course the ship would settle every so often. There'd be a bubble, and some more we'd lose a little more air. We started getting a little anxious, and we finally found a porthole near the water. And it was a battle port, and of course it was hanging the wrong way. So somebody had to, if you want to get through that porthole, somebody had to go down and raise the porthole and hold it open for you. I met a fellow in 1981 in Pearl Harbor, the anniversary over there. We had a little splinter meeting of the U.S.S. Oklahoma at Royal Hawaiian, and I happened to bump into this guy. We got comparing stories, found out we both commanded the same port. He was an ensign Mortensen, and he contends he was the one that held the port open for me. I don't know how he knows that. Really. I'll take his word for it, but I don't know how he could have known it. I didn't know him, and he didn't know me, I'm sure. But anyway, somebody held the portal open for me, and I eventually got out. And I knew, I had heard of 3 others that got out. He says there were 4 altogether. I don't know.
How long were you trapped inside the ship?
Well, I don't know that either. I never have known. I know I got to subbase about 11, and I've been in the water about a half an hour before being picked up by a motor launch. So I've always guessed about an hour. As far as I know, it was over with when I got out. I didn't see any, or was too numb to know. I don't know. Of course, I was covered with fuel oil. I couldn't see. Wiped my eyes to get the oil in my mouth. Didn't do any good because my hands were full of oil. As you popped up in this, it was a foot or 2 of oil. Some of our own, I think the Arizona and West Virginia, they released a lot of oil. I was on fire here and there. There was fire burning. So I really never know. And I never talked to anybody who'd been in there until I met Morton's in 1981. I assumed there were other people. I imagine that airport extended the whole length of the ship on that second deck. I just talked to a guy this morning at the hotel who got out a porthole on the main deck. He was in one of the offices. One deck of bed cars. They hadn't thought about that, but apparently there was an air pocket there.
Now, how far underwater were you? Any idea?
Well, I'm guessing. I don't know that either. If I really had a ship's dimension, I could figure it out. I always guessed 15 to 25 feet. It seemed like an eternity to me to get up there. And I didn't make it. I had to take a gas before I could, because you had to go down underwater and in through the porthole and then up. And I don't know. I really don't know. It seemed like a long ways, but only 15 to 20 feet.
Now,
I was a pretty good underwater swimmer in my youth. I was a young kid. So that was another problem we had down there. Some of these people didn't want to go through that porthole. They were afraid of it, didn't know where it went. We weren't thinking rationally, didn't know for sure where we were, didn't know the angle of the ship.
now, how did you know the porthole was there?
Well, we didn't. And I don't recall whether it was accidentally found or somebody went looking for it. Because it was underwater. We were along that angle of the deck and on the up in the corner, maybe 1.5 feet of airspace. And a little combing around to hang on to. It's not a very big room. The operating room wasn't very large.
Now, you say, is this where the doctors were, the medical?
Well, it was actually it was the surgery. It was the operating room. As we figured out later by the tile deck.
Now, where is that in the ship, the operating room?
Well, it was a little bit aft of where I had been. We were about midships in the print shop, and when I got up to the back of the second deck, of course I was on the other side then, I was on the starboard side. So actually we rode the starboard side all the way over to port, and then down 158 degrees. Didn't quite go 180, didn't quite turn upside down. The mast stuck in the bottom, but that's why it's very hard to figure out just how far it was from where we were. So that.
When you got up, you said you swam to the subbase?
No, I started to swim toward the Oklahoma. And they had some lines, Mortensen and I were talking about this, he saw the same thing, there were some lines, so that hawser was hanging over the ship, was all soaked with oil. There were a lot of sailors were panicking, they got over there and they grab onto that line and they just slip down the oil and push the other guy underneath.
Is this the Maryland?
No, this is the Oklahoma.
The Oklahoma.
The lines had been tied to the Maryland were draped over the bottom of the ship. And you couldn't swim very well in that oil. In fact, there were several people drowned in the area where I was, just late. I don't know why there weren't more boats around, really. I was on the water quite a while. I couldn't swim in that stuff, but I found some big pieces of insulation cork, and I just assumed they came off the Arizona magazine insulation cork. I don't know where else it come from. I got a piece under each arm and just bobbed around there until eventually launched from the motor launch from the Dobbin, which is a supply ship. Took me over to the subbase.
And from the subbase, what happened at the subbase?
Well, we first lay around the lawn heaving, and rear fuel oil, we'd all swallowed a lot of oil. And then eventually went into, they got us in a shower, because we just loaded with oil. I remember pouring a can of Brightmark polish over my head to help cut the oil, and I was all cut up in the back and my butt from going through that porthole, I assume. I didn't feel anything at the time, but it burned, like iodine. Then they gave us some clothes from the Lucky Bag, which was just people's dirty clothes that we picked up and thrown in a Lucky Bag, and so we didn't have clean clothes. I just had an old pair of dungarees. And later that night, we were able to go to small stores and get one complete set of clothes. And in 5 or 6 days later, I was transferred to the cruiser San Francisco. Stayed on that until I got shot up at Guadalcanal.
Guadalcanal.
Well, she was in a major night battle on November 13th, 1942. It's known as the Battle of the Solomons, in which she fought a night battle with there were 2 Jap battleships involved, with a number of cruisers. So I was badly wounded. I was a gunner's mate at that time. I was on an anti-aircraft battery. And I was badly wounded. I eventually wound up at Oak Knoll in Oakland Naval Hospital. And then subsequently, about 2 years later, I got a medical discharge.
Now, what exactly happened on the San Francisco? What exactly happened there at Guadalcanal on the San
Well,
Francisco?
she took an awful beating, but it was almost all topside, so she didn't sink. She was hit. We lost Admiral Callahan. We were carrying the flag. We lost Admiral Callahan. We lost our captain. Lost our executive officer. It was pretty much devastated topside. Down below decks, there were very few casualties. It's quite a famous battle. In fact, 4 medals of honor were given that one night. People on service.
What's your fondest memory of the Oklahoma?
Oh, just the general comradeship, and it was an easy ship. They talk about.
Go ahead.
They talk about easy ships and hard ships, and it depends on the skipper. Foy was a kindly fellow, and sort of left well enough alone. And he gave the men a lot of leeway, and it wasn't, if you didn't have your hat cocked at the right angle, you would put on report and that sort of thing. And, he ran it easy. They called it a good ship. Some you'd get a tirade on, and that would be communicated down to the boatswain mates and the chiefs and the division officers, and it would be hell on everybody. It was a good ship. So I remember mostly the friends, the comradeship of the thing.
Whenever anyone mentions the U.S.S. Oklahoma, what do you think of?
Well, I think of Pearl Harbor, just instantaneously. That's the first thought that comes to mind. It's the most dramatic thing that ever happens to anybody, is a thing like that. So
Were you here yesterday?
everything else kind of anticlimactic.
Yeah. Were you here yesterday for the T-bill ceremony?
Yes.
What was your reaction to that?
Well, I followed that list through name by name as I came across. I'd never seen a list of the casualties. I had known who most of the people I knew that were killed, but I ran across a few names I didn't know about. Going there, it startled me a little bit. Like I say, I'd never seen a casualty list. Word of mouth, who made it and who hadn't.
Did you ever pull duty in steering aft?
No, never did.
No. Okay. That's a
No.
steering.
Yeah, that's steering aft. Yeah. No, I've been in steering aft. I never. No, I wasn't. I was in deck division when I first came on, just for a few days, scraping paint on the bottom, and then transferred to the F division, which was fire control, into the print shop. And then when I was in the print shop, I didn't get any of that type of duty. Battle station was damage control party. We didn't pull the one-night watches. So, the print shop was almost like having a civilian job. Actually, it was a pretty good job on the ship.
Okay, hold on.
I might have it finally. You got one of those cards?
That's downstairs.
Another card downstairs?
How quick is it?
What's the guy's name? The odd thing about it doesn't show on the card, but that's what we reach. Well, anyway, he gave a poster. He gave us a poster after we finished. Just as this cross out, well, and then we deal with the print thing, shit. You can't print right on the line, you just cross everything out and go one. Or did you do one? Turn up the bottom of the printers. Log on. It says, I think it says subject, so you do subject print shop. And it's a date in July, it's the 7/21/41, or something, 20M. Well, that means they put 20,000 in those cars in July before December. So the supply department was ready for war. Our fleet was not. It's always intrigued me. And I've got an extra original of those. I sent two home if I can find it. One of them is scrapbook. Yeah, that's the intriguing thing to me. But it doesn't show on that car. This is a reproduction.
Out here in the hallway or downstairs?
It's downstairs.
Basement.
Just
As you go out.
Just as you go into your archive room.
Oh, I see, it's an archive.
There's a glass
Right.
thing there, there's some pictures saved. There's a reproduction of this car. But that logo was not on it. I don't know whether the reaper didn't pick it up, it wasn't on his car, or what. But it's real interesting in July, they would print 20,000 war casualty postcards. And the war was that far off.
Could you show us on the model about where the operating room was where you were trapped?
Well,
Or on the photograph too, or either one?
well, probably.
Yes, we are.
Well, that model is not an accurate model. It doesn't have all the broadside guns on it. Well, you see that main deck, the
Yes,
aft,
sir.
aft?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the main deck is the highest deck up on a ship that runs the length of the ship. So that's the main deck, where the fantail is, and there are two turrets there. Well, one deck below that is the second deck. And one deck below that's the third. And as I told you, I was on the third originally and got up to the second. Well, that hatch, you see that part where that goes up?
Yes, sir.
Well, there's a hatchway there that went into either S or F division. I forget which side of the ship they were on. And that's just a little ways, and there would have been that ladder down to the second deck and over. So I've been on that row of portholes just below the main deck aft. Fantastic, a row of portholes.
Yes, sir.
Probably over about where that gun barrel is here, I would guess. Roughly. Would be where the operating room. And of course, you rolled a port. So we went all the way over and around underneath on the other side. Now the guy in the main deck who was above me, I talked to this morning and said he got out through a porthole. Actually would have been below me on the other side, because he would have been one deck below underwater, if you see that clearly.
Well, Mr. Murphy, well, thank you.
Okay.